good to have you with us on this edition of the Urban Debate. I'm Tanvi Shukla. Straight up to our top story. Now, over the next 2 hours, we are going to address 4 different angles of the war against coronavirus. The first one is about testing. Now, viewers, a big debate has broken out whether testing should be made completely free in our country or not. And the two sides are very clearly divided. Those who say, of course, these are times of pandemic. We need to provide every kind of help possible, and there should be a test available for everybody, irrespective of whether they can afford it or not. But then there is the other side that says, well, if you start doing that, then it may become uneconomical and impossible for the hospitals and laboratories to carry out these tests. And those who can afford to pay should be allowed to pay, should be asked to pay. Now, all of this actually began because of the Supreme Court order. Here is what the Supreme Court said, that COVID-19 tests in government or private labs shall be free of cost. This was a ruling that came a few days ago. And only NABL accredited labs or agencies approved by WHO or ICMR should be conducting these tests. Now, I just want to go into details of the rationale that the Supreme Court gave us to just set the tone for this conversation. Supreme Court said it's the time of a national calamity, and that 4,500 rupees, which was the average cost of a COVID-19 test to be conducted, cannot be within the means of many. Simply saying, not everybody can even afford to pay 4,500 rupees in cash to get this test done. In many cases, it could be not just one family member, the entire family that may have to be tested. So the cost then adds up. Supreme Court further said, no person should be deprived from undergoing the COVID-19 test. That private hospitals and labs have an important role, and private hospitals should extend philanthropic services during the national crisis. But there are many of those viewers who disagree on this decision. Now, this is where the debate actually begins. Should people be charged 4,500 rupees? Should the government bear this cost? Should the private entities also be asked to bear some amount of this cost if the citizens are not paying as part of a philanthropic deed in times of a natural calamity? Let's just open this up for a debate. And joining me right now for this conversation are two very big names, voices that we all follow. Kiran Shaw, Chairperson for Biocon Limited, joins us this evening, and Arima Sundaram, Senior Advocate for the Supreme Court. Ms. Shaw, good evening. Good to have you with us. Let's begin with you. You have a slight disagreement with the testing being made completely free, I believe. Why is that?
So, Tanvi, let me answer your question by saying that I certainly believe the test ought to be free for people. But my point is that you cannot put that onus on the private labs. These are small organizations. They do not have the means to, provide free services because they themselves are struggling. And they themselves need, money to operate their services. And I believe that this cost should be borne by state governments and by insurance companies. But it should not be the onus of the testing labs to bear this cost and give it free, because they can't. They themselves need money to, buy the kits, to deliver the services, to collect the samples, etc., etc. These are labor-intensive operations. They need to pay their employees as well. And therefore, if you ask them to provide it free of cost, then I'm afraid that they will not be able to do a large number of tests. They will have to significantly downsize. And the whole purpose of inducting the private sector labs to augment and rapidly scale up the tests will be defeated. So that's my point of view, that please don't request the diagnostic labs to provide free services. I think it is the job of the government and the insurance companies and CSR funding to provide free testing.
Okay, interesting point that you raised about CSR funding, and I'll come to that in just a bit. But let me also get opening comments from Mr. Sundaram and understand where he stands on this debate.
Well, Tanvi, I don't think Ms. Shaw also is objecting to the concept that these tests have to be free for persons who require these tests and people who cannot afford it. So from what I've just heard, she has no objection to this also. The question is who is to bear the cost, and that is what I think we're basically talking about. I think without a doubt, a pandemic like this, a cost of dealing with it rests on the state. And it is the duty of the government, the state, to bear the cost. Now, the question is, how do you go about bearing this cost? So it becomes a question of practicality. Now, as Ms. Shaw pointed out, to ask these private labs, especially private labs, small labs, labs which are really, you can't call them huge money machines, but people who really depend, the labs which really are surviving on day-to-day basis, to ask them to bear the cost is not a possibility. However, the point is we have to meet the greater problem, which is really the testing required. And the testing is required to be done free of cost for people who can't afford it. So the way I look at it is threefold. Number one, the private testing can be free for the people who cannot afford it. For people who can afford it, people who are taxpayers, people who can afford to take these tests, who would normally go and get such tests done, who can afford to go to doctors. Now, these are the people who should pay for it nonetheless. So the question of subsidizing those who cannot pay arises. Number two, that subsidy has to be paid by the government, for which it can raise funds in a number of ways. One of the ways it can raise the funds is what is already being done through various funds set up, like the PM Cares Fund and other funds which have already been set up. And these funds which have donations, these funds can then be earmarked for this. Of course, it may require the private labs to do it on their own steam, on their own cost, and then claim a reimbursement. But there again, a rule should be made that the reimbursement has to be done within 24 hours. So wherever one looks, finally, the cost rests with the state and cannot look anywhere else. How the state raises the money for it can be varied. You're talking about CSR, you can talk about, for example, a person who is a taxpayer can even offer that if that much is paid, it's paid towards the tax payment from that person. For the coming year, it will be set off against the tax. I'm not talking about a free of tax donation. I'm saying that will be an amount given to the government, which will be set off against taxes to be paid by them. Or from funds like the PM Cares Fund. Now, these are the funds which shall pay. It's only a question of working out the details how to do it. And for that, I think if the private labs have to take the blow for a short period of time until they're reimbursed, but making sure that the reimbursement will come soon, then I think it is fair enough. Secondly, there cannot be any profit making in this. The private labs have to do it at cost price. They can get a reimbursement. It cannot be by way of a profit, because that'll be their own contribution. The profit which they would otherwise have made, they are going to give up, and that's their own contribution to this pandemic which we are facing. And number three, among the private labs which have been selected are obviously large enough private labs. They're not as though they are holes in the corner. They are large enough private labs which will be able to take that blow for a short period of time. And I think, therefore, at the first stage, number one, people who cannot afford it should be tested free. And number two, that will be reimbursed by the state in a very, very quick manner. And number three, that money will be reimbursed by the state raising the funds in whichever way they want to. But the final liability to pay the money has to lie with the state, with the government, whether it's the center or the state, with the government.
Okay. But not for everybody. You say those who can afford it should pay for it.
And secondly, I'm going to say something very extreme which will be taken very amiss maybe by many quarters. We now know that a great pandemic, the great problem has arisen because of a gathering of people within a certain shrine for the purpose of a religious exercise. Now, that is itself a body which has funds in itself. It's a trust which has funds. Now, that trust should be asked to contribute and pay, should be made to contribute and pay to have people tested.
Okay, okay. I take some of your points, and you're saying that in cases where there have been clear violations of the norms, and hence we're looking at a situation like in the Tablighi Jamaat case, that a large number of cases have now taken place. The institution that can very well manage it and afford it should pay for it. Let me pick up some of the other points that you've raised, Mr. Sundaram, and take it back to Ms. Shaw. Ms. Shaw, I tried finding and our research team actually made many calls to various labs in the country today to try and understand the breakup of this cost. The point that Mr. Sundaram makes is that this should not be for profit making. Now, can you give us any insights into what's the cost breakup and what is it that the private labs are putting in so that we have a clearer idea on how much should the state be funding?
First and foremost, Tanvi, I want to tell you that this cost was arrived at by the ICMR, who basically said that this is what it was costing the government. And therefore, they are not prepared to pay anything more than this cost. And I think, therefore, even though the private labs realized that they had to do it at cost, they felt that being a humanitarian crisis, they were willing to forego any margin. So please understand that the costs involved are about the cost of the kit, which is known to everybody, including the government. There is a cost embedded, which is about having protective equipment, PPEs for all the staff who are testing and who are collecting. And there were all the other operational costs that go with the testing of these kind of kits, these diagnostics. So the costs are very transparent, and these are costs that have been agreed by the government, no negotiations. It's been an MRP that the ICMR has stipulated because this is what it costs the government. So it is a cost price. It is not a cost plus price. And I think that's why you should understand that the private diagnostic labs are very much within their brief to actually conduct these particular tests at the cost stipulated by the ICMR. And I don't see why people think that they're profiteering, because they're not.
No, we wouldn't know. I'm simply asking the question that once that cost has been arrived at, is there any profit, that's getting made? But keep that aside. Let's get to the other point that Mr. Sundaram was making, which is that, maybe in the short term, the private labs will have to pay for it, but the reimbursements can come gradually. Is that a model that seems workable to you? We do know what happens when you talk about pending dues from the government sometimes.
I really don't think diagnostic labs have the wherewithal and the financial ability to sustain long terms of credit. So that's what I think is the big concern. I think Mr. Sundaram said that if it can be paid within 24 hours, that should be perfectly acceptable. In fact, I would even go so far as to say that if you actually created a portal where the labs, when they upload the results based on Aadhaar cards, should be immediately paid for by the government. I think those kind of digital models should actually work very well. So I think as they do the tests, as they upload the data on the portal, they should be paid. I think those kind of things are perfectly workable.
Okay, I just also want to put forward some of the other views that we've got, especially from the private labs, and many of these lab owners and founders have actually been on our channels for various conversations. For example, Dr. Arjun Dang of the Dang's Lab says that there is a need to incur numerous fixed costs. I understand that the pandemic calls for immense infection control measures. Private labs are barely able to recover these costs. The government mandated cost of 4,500 rupees isn't enough, alluding to the same point as Kiran Shaw right now. Dr. Arvind Lal, who owns and runs the Dr. Lal Path Labs, said, we are talking to the government. We want to find a solution, and we are only charging what the government has approved. So clearly, they are also not very all right with what the Supreme Court has right now ruled. And Dr. Velamani, CEO of Thyrocare, has said government should tell us not to charge, and we will not charge. We've paused our activity to avoid unnecessary distress. We are awaiting more clarity. Let me also ask you this question, Ms. Shaw. Do you think we're moving a little too slowly on this issue since the SC verdict has come? This could just cause a lot more confusion within the labs. They may start holding back on testing at a time when we really need to ramp up our testing.
Absolutely. I think this judgment has to be resolved very, very rapidly. I hope they basically withdraw that judgment and change this judgment in a way that it allows and enables the private sector to start testing, because there is a lot of concern, there is a lot of confusion. And I think, the kind of judgment that has been delivered is absolutely something that the private labs were not prepared for. Because once you discuss and agree with something that the government wants you to do, well, you expect it to be then that's to be what it is. But when this kind of a judgment is then superimposed by the Supreme Court, it becomes very difficult for these private labs to continue with their activity. And what we need at this time is a huge ramp up of testing. As you know, today we are testing about 14,000 tests a day. But for a country of the size of India, if you want to extrapolate data, you need to do a minimum of 100,000 tests a day. Now, if private sector labs are not going to be brought into the equation, I don't see how you're going to be even able to achieve these levels of testing.
No, I completely agree with you that I think we need to ramp up our testing to a great extent. We're nowhere close to what we should be doing to even get a sense of where we exactly stand. Mr. Sundaram, if I could just come back to you on that front. Because the Supreme Court has said this, and obviously this has led to now a little bit of fear in the minds of private labs and quite a bit of debate and confusion. Do you believe that the government should move in quickly with a clear set of rules? Because yes, while it is advisable for companies to put it out of their CSR funds, or it is advisable for institutions to fund it for their own people, all of that may actually just take time, and unfortunately we don't have time right now.
Look, the fact of the matter, Tanvi, is that India is in a state of medical emergency. We are in a state of emergency and we have to deal with this problem. Now, in an emergency, every person chips in to the maximum that they are able, whether you like it or not. Now, if people like you and I are able to do it, we have to chip in by trying to assist those who are less fortunate, by providing food for them, by providing groceries for them, to do whatever we can. That's our duty, and that is the basic duty of our society. Now, similarly, in a case of an emergency, everyone has to pull in his weight. These private labs, let's accept one fact. These private labs are not running for charity. These private labs are labs running as a business to make a profit. Now, for a period of time, if they have to take a hit, they have to take a hit, which is why I find it absurd when I heard one of the statements made by one of the private pathologists that there are a lot of costs like fixed costs, other costs, etc. This is not a case where you're trying to recover your fixed cost or other costs through these tests. These tests have to be purely on a cost, exact cost for that test and nothing more. Nothing more than that. Now, how do you raise the money for it? As Ms. Shaw said, you cannot ask them to raise the money for it unless they're going to be magnanimous, charitable, and kind enough to say, yes, we will take a hit and we will do it. But if they are not willing to do it, very well, then they can be given back their money, but not money plus even 1 paise. They can be given the exact money. There's no question of fixed cost or other costs or recovery or machine costs, recovery costs. There's no such thing. It's only the exact cost of testing. Now, for that, it is the duty of the state to provide. It is the duty of the government to provide. And the government has to provide for it. It is the government's duty. As to how the government makes the money to provide for it, it is for the government to know. Now you've got a PM Cares Fund, which is getting a huge amount of monies, as is being advertised every day. Now you can take money from that fund for the time being. Now Ms. Shaw came up with a very good suggestion of this portal. But whatever it is, for a period of time, people who can afford it have to take a hit. And whether we like to accept it or not, These private labs are labs which come in the category of people who can afford, because they are not in it for charity. But at the same time, I do not believe that they should be made to bear the cost. They should recover the cost. We have to work out a very good machination by which they can recover the costs at the earliest possible time. And that's where the government should move. And I don't think there's any time to waste. It's no use waiting and working out a whole system in 10 days. This is something which should have been worked out yesterday. We shouldn't even be discussing it today. It should be in operation immediately, and the government has to take an immediate decision on how to reimburse. So far as the private labs are concerned, till that decision is taken, they nonetheless have to continue with their social function of doing these tests.
Yes, no, I completely agree with you. This should have been done yesterday. Very quickly, before I wrap up this conversation, Ms. Shaw, we are also now looking at at a stage where there will be hopefully be a large scale of testing via the rapid test kits that the government has ordered, and they've now begun to come in. They will now be given to the various state governments. What happens then? What about, they're supposed to be cheaper, they're supposed to be a lot more affordable. Will that help?
Well, these are all different types of tests, Tanvi. These are the ones that you're talking about right now are the PCR-based tests, which are the real reliable tests in terms of positive and negative outcomes. And then you have the serological tests, and those have to be done in a very careful way, because it has to be done at a stage where the person is either at a very active stage of the disease or has recovered. So if you give it too earlier on, it doesn't capture the virus. So I think that's what is difficult about serological tests. It's the timing of testing. But nevertheless, those tests are extremely important when you're trying to look at the community spread, when you're trying to look at population-based rapid testing. These are all very important, tests, because these are qualitative tests, and you can actually get a quick dipstick read of how the virus has spread. So I think everything is going to be very important. But I also want to make one more comment, and that is that, look, we also have government testing labs which are giving it free of cost. And I think that also should be factored into the equation. And please do not forget the insurance companies, because 55% of our population are not insured, but the rest are insured. And I think insurance companies should also be made to, pay for these tests. We should not let them go scot-free. So I think these are some of the, ways of approaching this problem that the diagnostic labs have. Secondly, I also want to tell you that the diagnostic labs actually at the moment are struggling badly, because they've actually lost a lot of their business in the lockdown. Nobody is coming for any routine testing. So they really are struggling for tests. So the only thing that they have right now are the COVID tests. So I think we must also factor that into the equation. So I really believe this is something that has to urgently be resolved, just like Dr. Aryama Sundaram said, that we cannot afford to just take a week to resolve this matter. It should have been done yesterday, and there has to be a sense of urgency and fairness in the way it's resolved.
Yes, absolutely. I thank both of you for joining us, and really, it's always a pleasure to have both of you with your thoughts and your opinions, and especially on a matter like this, which is extremely crucial. And I think everybody agrees that the government needs to move fast on this and take a decision very quickly before we begin to see any kind of impact on ground. Testing is the most important part and the biggest tool we have right now in deciding our strategy on how to battle coronavirus. We are staring at a possibility of the lockdown coming to an end on 14th of April. The government by this weekend will have to take a decision on what happens next, and a lot of what happens next now and a week later or 2 weeks later or a month later will actually depend on what the test results also show us about the spread of coronavirus. So thank you to both of our panelists for joining us. I agree, perhaps the PM Cares Fund can be looked at. I do agree that the state governments and the center needs to bear the cost of it. The onus can't be on people, just like the Supreme Court also said. Perhaps the private companies can look at their own employees. Insurance companies need to be brought in. The government needs to pay for its own employees as well as people who are below the poverty line. For them, it has to be funded, and there should be a cost. Maybe even the private sector can look at, or institutions can look at as well. But whichever way we go forward, a decision needs to be taken as soon as possible. Supreme Court has made its view very clear. You've heard the other sides as well. Let's hope the government comes out with a clear guideline very soon. Thank you for our two panelists for joining us. Let's move on. And like I was just saying, viewers, the fact of the matter is that the lockdown for 3 weeks that Prime Minister Modi had announced comes to an end in just a few days from now. What happens then? That's what everybody is asking. Well, two states have made it very clear. But what is it that the center is saying? Today in the day, Central Health Minister Dr. Harshvardhan held a news briefing. And while he didn't make a direct comment on what is it that the government has decided, I'm sure that announcement will only come by Sunday now. The fact of the matter is that he did say that it takes about 2 to 4 weeks for the curve to flatten. And he also said that we are currently in our 3rd week. Now, many are actually interpreting it by saying that perhaps he meant 3 more weeks of lockdown. I don't think that's what he meant, but decide for yourself. This is what Dr. Harshvardhan said when he was giving us insights onto how the patterns have really emerged and where we stand.
कुछ स्टेट्स के अंदर ज़रूर बीमारी थोड़ा सा असाधारण गति से आगे बढ़ रही है, लेकिन अभी लॉकडाउन के हम 3रे सप्ताह में हैं। साधारणतः जो एपिडेमियोलॉजिस्ट का भी कहना है कि 2 से 4 सप्ताह तो इसके कर्व को फ्लैट होने में नॉर्मली भी लगता है। इसलिए हम जरा भी धैर्य को ना खोएं, परिश्रम के में कोई कमी ना रखें। जो टेक्निकल एंगल से जितने भी हमारे इनपुट्स हो सकते हैं उसको गहराई से हम करें, हर विषय पर पैनी निगाह रखें। और अब जबकि देश के अंदर स्वास्थ्य मंत्रालय, एनसीडीसी और सब प्रकार के एक्सपर्ट्स के माध्यम से हॉट स्पॉट्स को लोकेट कर दिया गया है, लेबल कर दिया गया, उनके लिए स्ट्रैटेजीज डिफाइन कर दी गई हैं, डीएम्स को उसका इंचार्ज बना दिया गया है, हेल्थ डिपार्टमेंट के ऑफिशियल्स उसके साथ जुड़े हैं, स्वयं भारत के कैबिनेट सेक्रेटरी सभी डीएम्स के साथ वीडियो कॉन्फ्रेंसिंग कर रहे हैं, प्रधानमंत्री जी सभी चीफ मिनिस्टर्स के साथ लगातार वीडियो कॉन्फ्रेंसिंग कर रहे हैं। तो हमें पूरा विश्वास है कि हम सब मिलकर आने वाले समय के अंदर इस जंग में पूरी सफलता प्राप्त करेंगे।
Let's also get you the latest from Punjab, where the government is gearing up for the harvest season. Remember, this is also the time where crops are ready to be harvested, and if the farmers are left in the lurch and nobody comes to buy their produce, that will begin a whole different set of problems. So the Punjab government has actually decided to increase the number of mandis from 1,800 to 3,800 so that there isn't too much of congestion. Remember, even in mandis, we have to keep in mind that social distancing must be maintained. Punjab Chief Minister also said that apart from police and district officials, governance personnel will also man these mandis. And of course, Punjab is the second state after Odisha to decide to extend the lockdown even before the central government makes a decision.
The lifting of lockdown will only be for farmers, or will it be a general lift?
No, we are going to allow this on this lockdown relief only for farmers for the moment. To do this, let me tell you that the figures that are being projected for India, that we are going to peak by July or August, and that things will really flatten out and things will start normalizing around October, November. That these are very frightening figures. And for any government to take a decision to say that I'm going to do away with lockdown is only increasing the infection rate going to go up rapidly. And that I don't think any government can take a...
Well, time to take a break. Lots more news on the other side. We put the spotlight on what's happened in Maharashtra. Now, viewers, if you remember the HTIL company that was in the thick of the PMC Bank scam, the same company and their promoters were also under investigation in 2 other cases. actually got VVIP treatment in Maharashtra and got special passes in times of coronavirus to travel to their guest house in Mahabaleshwar. How did that happen when you and I are stuck in our homes? That's the big question. Stay with me. Down. And sometimes it does become a little challenging when you talk about getting your essential supplies, when you talk about staying away from your loved ones. Almost all of us do have a challenge here or there that we're dealing with. Guess who does not? Scam accused. A family accused of bribery, accused of money laundering, under investigation from the CBI, by the Enforcement Directorate and by the Economic Offences Wing of the Mumbai Police. That family, the Wadhwans, who own companies like DHFL and HCIL, they're not having any trouble. They nicely went and settled down in Lonavala first. And when things became tricky in Lonavala, as the lockdown got announced, they got special permission from their friend, who's their alleged friend, who's the Principal Secretary of the Home Department in Maharashtra. And they got special passes to travel all the way from Lonavala to Mahabaleshwar. In times of a lockdown, in times of coronavirus, somebody who's under investigation and is repeatedly being summoned by the investigative authorities managed to get away, skip the summons, give coronavirus as an excuse, and nicely stayed in a luxurious place, first in Lonavala and now in Mahabaleshwar, all with the permission of the state government. Now, as this news emerged, we are now being told that the said official, the Principal Secretary of the Home Department, has been sent on leave pending enquiry. But it does make us ask this question. Are the rules different for the rich and the Aam Aadmi? Are the rules different for real estate barons and the Aam Aadmi? Are the rules different for scam accused and the honest? That's the big question. Let me first go across to Sandhya, who's joining us with more details. Sandhya, tell us what happened in the last few weeks. How is it the CBI and the Enforcement Directorate are not able to question them or fine them, it seems, but they've got the state backing them and giving them special passes?
Yes, absolutely, Tanvi. It is shocking. Now, if CBI has to be believed, CBI is saying that since it was on 9th of March for the first time when CBI raided the residences and offices of Kapil and Dheeraj Wadhwan, when CBI filed a case and made them co-accused along with Rana Kapoor in the Yes Bank loan defaulting matter. And when the searches were going on, the accused, both the Wadhwan, were nowhere to be found. And after that, on 17th of March, it took a Mumbai court, a special Mumbai CBI court, to and since then also CBI is claiming that CBI was looking for the accused. But despite that, despite having anything that was issued against them, there are notices which are lookout notices which are issued against both the accused. Now ED and CBI, both of them have cases against them. And Tanvi, it's not just the Yes Bank case which these agencies are looking into. In fact, if we talk about ED is actually looking into multiple cases where these people are accused, whether it's money laundering, whether it's buying properties from gangster Iqbal Mirchi, and now their connection with Rana Kapoor as well. Multiple frauds they are accused of. Despite that, despite lookout notices, despite non-bailable warrants issued against them, they crossed borders, they changed cities, and it was not happening. They were with a convoy. There were 23 people in 5 vehicles. That's how huge the convoy was. And the most surprising and shocking part is that how a permission letter, which looked like an undertaking given by none other than the Principal Secretary of Maharashtra Special Department, a senior IPS officer, Amitabh Gupta, that was given, and these people were using it as a token, as a gate pass to cross all the check nakas, nakebandis, all the police hopping. In fact, the letter said that how Wadhwans are Amitabh Gupta's family friends, and they have a family emergency. Of course, when these people reached Mahabaleshwar, the alert local citizens, they informed the police. Police, of course, went there. These people were quarantined as per the procedure, and an FIR was filed against them. And of course, when the police started its inquiry, its investigation, it realized that there was no family emergency whatsoever. But all these people, and now Wadhwans were not traveling alone. This is again another thing.
Right.
Tanvi, they had
Right.
the security staff and the house helping staff as well with them.
So the entire entourage, the domestic help, the security staff, family members, a good set of 23 people got special passes during this curfew-like situation, in a lockdown situation that all of us are very duly following. Thank you, Sandhya, for joining us, and getting us that update. Let's say good evening to our panelists. Mr. Sanjay Jha of the Congress and Tuhin Sin of the BJP joins us right now. It is disappointing, Tuhin, when you see examples like this. The special passes are meant for our corona warriors. The special passes are meant for those who need urgent help, medical help, may have some kind of emergency. It's not meant for scam accused to travel from one hill station to the other.
Well, Tanvi, if you look at it, we have been extremely restrained in criticizing the Maharashtra government despite its multiple goof-ups in the last 2.5 weeks. But what happened on the night of Wednesday is unpardonable. It is unacceptable. It just shows what the focus of the Maharashtra government has been throughout the lockout. And that is why this lockout is an absolute sham. While, in gated societies, you have the maximum restrictions, which is good. The moment you step out into selective ghettos, the moment when it comes to corrupt, like the Wadhwans, there are different rules, there are different parameters. And for a home secretary, for a principal secretary in the home department to facilitate this, I can tell you he could not have done this in this extraordinary situation without the blessing of somebody very senior. And that is where the CM needs to answer. That is where the Home Minister of Maharashtra needs to quit. This is an extraordinary lapse, or this is an extraordinary act of criminal negligence. But unfortunately, there is no response yet from the Chief Minister of Maharashtra, and that shows why the lockdown is such a sham.
It does beg us to ask the question, why is the government so silent on it, Mr. Sanjay Jha? I mean, the BJP is actually going as far as demanding the resignation of the Chief Minister. Your response to that?
Tanvi, I think Tuhin knows it perhaps even better than me, that the role of the Wadhwan family in the scams that have happened in both the PMC Bank as well as in Yes Bank has got significant political patronage of the BJP. He knows that. And therefore, I'm going to be very blunt and forthright. What has the government done? The government has straight away taken action against Mr. Amitabh Gupta, who basically on his own, this has got nothing to do with the Home Minister. Let me clarify for the benefit of your viewers. This has got nothing to do with the Home Minister. This has got nothing to do with Mr. Thackeray as the Chief Minister either. The fact of the matter is that this was a decision taken by a bureaucrat unilaterally, clearly wishing to favor the Wadhwan family. And, in doing so, endangering the lives of many common people. But more important, this is also the culture of crony capitalism that was always there with the Bharatiya Janata Party. The first among equals, Tanvi, we know that. And, end of day, this is the hard reality. People having access from the business with the bureaucracy and the politics, and then trying to exploit it to the hilt. Now here the government, just one minute to it. The government has actually taken prompt action right away. I mean, I know for a fact that a lot of people are now telling us that we should review, we should make sure that any bureaucrat who was appointed by the Devendra Fadnavis government, we need to scrutinize their antecedents and their credentials, because they're going to put our government at risk because of their own corrupt and clearly behavior of collusive interest of their own.
No, but that's a little too convenient, Mr. Sanjay Jha, to say that this is a man who was appointed by Devendra Fadnavis' government, so it's not our problem or our responsibility, and the blame is on the BJP. If you're accusing them of crony capitalism and favoring these guys, what has the current government done? The current government gave the same guys special passes. That's not really called punishment. Now, if you expect us to be satisfied with another FIR, what's an FIR going to do? The EOW, the CBI, the ED are investigating these guys. These guys are still having all the luxuries and fun in the world.
Tanvi, a very pertinent question. But think about it. I mean, why Tuhin's, standard outrage against the government is totally misplaced. If there was any interest, a vested interest from our government, why would we go and suspend a very senior bureaucrat? We wouldn't do that, right? I mean, even the bureaucrat has a right to go public and say what was the real reason. You can make out that he mentioned there that these are friends of mine.
There is a letter, Mr. Sanjay Jha. I'm interrupting you here, but that argument makes no sense. There is a letter that has emerged. The letter clearly shows that this man gave the permission, signed off on it, and said, these are my family friends. He's giving them special privileges because they know him. Now, in that case, I don't think we should be patting the government for the action that's been taken. What else would you have done? You can't stand by that and defend that.
Tanvi, let me tell you. Supposing Tuhin was part of the government as an IAS or an IPS. No, let me just give you one. No, let's make the example very simplistic. Tuhin decides of his own that he's a great buddy of mine, and he gives me some kind of a pass to go and
Sanjay, I don't expect you to trivialize things. It's a serious scenario today.
I'm making it a very simple example. Like 1 minute. You decide on your own volition to be very compassionate with me. How can the chief minister be aware of your linkages with me? And this is precisely the point, that your party had a link with the Wadhwan family. Your party has links with the scamsters in the DHFL. And Mr. Gupta here is
created in 2007, 2008.
Towards him.
Sanjay, they were all created in 2007, 2008.
Now we can
it's a rags to riches story. We all know that. Anyway, let me quickly
rebut one at a time, gentlemen. One at a time.
There are. Let me just quickly rebut some of the things which you have said. Tanvi, this is an absentee government where the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. So probably the CM has no idea what the Home Minister is up to. Just 3 days ago, we saw a person in Thane being beaten up by the goons of Jitendra Ahwad. Is that what the police has been busy with during the lockdown? I mean, and now when you say that when Sanjay says that these officials have been appointed by Devendra Fadnavis ji, is he trying to say that the present government has no control over the officials? I must tell you over here that it is because of one of the officials appointed by Devendra Fadnavis ji, Praveen Pardesi, that Mumbai is still under control. If he were not there, I don't think the CM is at all involved or has any clue of what is happening. It's a very precarious situation, and I would request Sanjay not to give trivial examples to deflect attention from the core issue over here. Forget the person being sent on leave. A criminal charge, an FIR should have been filed by the government itself, which has been filed by Kiran Shaw ji. He should be charged with criminal negligence. None of that has happened. It's very convenient to send the person on leave. He'll be back in a month's time.
Yeah, I agree with you. Correct, fair enough. Mr. Sanjay Jha, suspension or being sent on leave is not enough. And especially if you make the allegation that this is a Fadnavis government appointed man, we didn't even put him there. File an FIR, sack him.
Tanvi, let me tell you, one step at a time. There is a process, there is a protocol. Tuhin is already trying to prejudge the issue. When you say that the person at this high level of rank is sent on leave, that's a very serious rebuke, by the way. And that is the beginning of the process and the investigation and the action that will happen. Number two, very, very important here. And this is what we need to note, that what Tuhin is, frankly speaking, making a lot of rhetorical statements on. This government has actually done an outstanding job on containing coronavirus in perhaps the most difficult state in India. I say this not just because we are part of the government, but this is an international destination, has the busiest international airport, the commercial capital of India, the largest number of migrants, the entertainment capital of this country, constantly having a nightlife that never stops. And despite all of it, the largest slum in Asia in Dharavi, and we have actually done a brilliant job. The whole country is actually applauding the number of tests the government has done.
That is because
how quickly we have.
I don't know what Sanjay is saying today, but
and other aspects.
No, Mr. Sanjay Jha, a lot of the credit there will go to the people who are staying indoors. A lot of the credit will go to the people who are staying indoors and following government regulations, and not to the likes of Wadhwans who are actually getting special passes made to go from Lonavala to Mahabaleshwar, running away from the investigative agencies. So the government is doing what it is supposed to do. And in a state like Maharashtra with such high number of cases, that has to be done. But that can't be a justification for what has happened in this case. This kind of VVIP racism can't be accepted.
Absolutely, Tanvi. Let me repeat it again and tell the viewers of your very respected channel Mirror Now that the government in Maharashtra will take the strictest possible action. It has already sent him on leave. There will be an investigation. It is pretty apparent right from the very beginning that there is a personal engagement that he's had with the Wadhwan family. Therefore, there could be all kinds of other, kind of relationship issues that might crop up, which might even have financial forensic issues that need to be investigated. They will be done. I just want to assure everyone that we have taken prompt action. The government has got nothing to do with the permission given by one individual in his own personal capacity. The moment we found this guilty individual, we have punished him publicly with immediate effect. Now, the real issue that the BJP is jumping all over the place, and my friend Tuhin is a smart cookie, but Tuhin knows, and Tuhin will know this. But your
patronage to the Wadhwan family, and tomorrow when the electoral bonds issue comes up, they will have been amongst the funders of your party. You know that. I'm sure they have funded you in the BJP, and that's one of the reasons why you are probably, I'm sure, trying to act holier than thou at this point.
So, if the allegations that you're making do come true tomorrow, Mr. Jha, that just goes on to show that the governments can come and go, political parties in power can change, but those who are rich and influential and have the contacts will just get away, will just still get treated the same. I think that essentially just proves that point, but I will ask Tuhin Sinha to respond to what you're saying.
Sanjay's charges are imaginary, they are fictitious. I'm a fiction author, but he seems to be making all sorts of charges today, purely to deflect attention from a criminal act of negligence which has taken place. So rather than being drawn into his charges, let me give you some basic facts which will tell you the gravity or the seriousness or the precariousness of the situation which exists in Mumbai and in Maharashtra today. Now, Mumbai has 20% of the total coronavirus cases in the country and 50% deaths. And mind you, the restrictions have been in place from 15th March, closing of all the public places which he was mentioning, whether discs or movie halls, all of them have been closed from 15th March onwards. There are some 350 containment zones, if I'm not mistaken, which accounts for more than 50% of the containment zones in the country, which effectively means that in the last 25 days, the lockout has been a sham. It has been a disaster. You have not managed to prevent the spread of the disease across the city, and that explains the abject failure of the government. We can, this is not the time for political discussion. I can respond to all his queries about who was associated with Wadhwans or who was not, but let us not deflect attention from the sheer precariousness of the situation. In fact, today, Sanjay, let me remind you that your own leader, Shashi Tharoor, has tweeted about the precariousness of hospitals in the city, and he has used the word pathetic arrangement. You can check his tweet. That is the reality of Mumbai, and that is the reality of Maharashtra.
Mr. Jha, last 1 minute to you before I wrap up this conversation. Tell us, will you ensure that the man who signed off on that letter gets punished, and an example is set that VVIPs, especially when they're scam accused, will not be given preferential treatment in times of a pandemic?
Tanvi, I can tell you, speaking on behalf of the entire government, I don't have to take anybody's permission. We will fix the problem. We'll ensure that all these close bodies of the Bharatiya Janata Party will be put in place for the unilateral autocratic conduct, which has actually been anti the entire health protocol that the government has built up. I want to tell my friend Tuhin, Tuhin, what is the headline of today is what's happening in Madhya Pradesh and Indore and Bhopal, where you destabilized the Congress government. In your lust for power, you made sure that the entire assembly was actually kept functioning. Then you toppled the government. Your entire BJP party went there and celebrated. They said, damn social distancing. They actually said, damn to the Prime Minister. But you didn't care. Today,
I'll tell you the difference between Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra.
Just 1 minute. Madhya Pradesh doesn't have a cabinet. Madhya Pradesh doesn't have a health minister. And the epidemic there is rising. The pandemic, rather, is rising at a dangerous level. You have endangered lives of innocent people in Madhya Pradesh. Now, that is the kind of politics that you play.
Should I tell you the difference between Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra?
No, Tuhin, let me tell you, that is the height of political immorality.
No, gentlemen, no. I'm going to stop even Sanjay Jha. Gentlemen, I am not going to get into a blame game of which government is doing a better job and which government is completely failing here. Through this crisis, Mira now has ensured that while we do seek accountability, we don't get into political blame games, which is why largely I have not even had political representatives on the coronavirus conversations and discussions. So I'm going to interrupt here and thank both of you for joining us. This is a different case. And this is not acceptable what has happened here. A family and brothers, promoters of real estate companies and various other companies, millionaires, accused in not one case but multiple cases, accused of having close links with somebody like Mirchi Iqbal, accused of money laundering, accused of paying kickbacks to bankers of the PMC Cooperative Bank. The reason why the bank today is barely functional and the depositors can't access their money. These people managed to get a sign-off from the government, from one of the topmost bureaucrats in the Maharashtra government, to get further away from Enforcement Directorate and CBI. Can you imagine that? To get further away. And they gave the excuse of coronavirus to say, oh, we can't appear before ED and CBI because there is the fear of infection. There is a threat of us getting exposed to infection, of us traveling in such difficult times. But they managed to travel with their entourage all the way from Lonavala to Mahabaleshwar at a time when people are struggling in every town and city to get beyond their society gate, to get basic essentials and medicines at a time when elderly and those with medical conditions have to take an extra effort to go and get passes made so that they can be treated and the doctor can see them. This is the kind of preferential treatment we've given out to scam accused. This is not acceptable. Viewers, we are told that pandemics like coronavirus are great levelers. I don't see that happening in this case. Strict action must be taken and the government must give us a detailed explanation. Thank you for joining us on this conversation.